For 3.5 years, NASCAR fans had a comfortable story. Ty Gibbs was the kid with the famous last name, the grandson who got the cup seat because of who he was related to, not because he'd earned it. And for a while, the numbers didn't exactly push back. An 18th place career average finish. 0 wins in 130 starts, close calls at Darlington and Chicago that ended with second place. Close enough to tease, not close enough to silence anyone. The narrative was simple. He's decent, but he's not that guy. He's a placeholder driving grandfather's equipment. Then Bristol happened. And what happened at Bristol wasn't a lucky fuel call or a wreck fest that gifted someone a win they didn't earn. What happened was Ty Gibbs sat on old tires in an overtime restart, stared down Ryan Blaney and Kyle Larson, 2 reigning champions with nearly 100 laps of fresher rubber, and beat them both to the line. That's not a breakthrough. That's a statement. And the reason it matters goes way past one Sunday afternoon in Tennessee. Let's rewind to what Gibbs' 2026 season actually looked like heading into Bristol, because this is the part most people glossed over. Through 7 races, the number 54 had 5 top 5 finishes and 6 top 10s. He matched Tyler Reddick, the hottest driver in the series, with 4 wins. For most top 5s on the year, he had 6 consecutive finishes of 6th or better, tying the longest streak of his Cup career. None of that was talked about the way it should have been. You know why? Because the narrative around Ty Gibbs was already locked in. People had decided who he was, and no amount of top 5s were going to change that without a win attached. Bristol changed that. Not slowly, not gradually. It ripped the door off. The way the race played out tells you something about his competitive instincts, too. Larson was dominant. He won the first 2 stages and led 284 of 505 laps. Blaney led 190 laps from the pole. Gibbs wasn't the fastest car all day, but when his crew chief made the call to stay out under caution while Blaney and Larson pitted, Gibbs inherited the lead. That's a gamble. Old tires against fresh ones at Bristol. A track that eats grip for breakfast. Conventional wisdom says you lose that bet. And then the caution came again at lap 498, setting up the first overtime at Bristol in 11 years. At that point, Blaney's closing, Larson's lurking, and Gibbs is defending the lead on rubber that had no business holding up. He held them off. Not by a fluke, by driving the thing. And then came the moment in the media center afterward that I think people need to pay more attention to. Gibbs didn't celebrate like a kid who got lucky. He didn't do a wide-eyed, I can't believe it routine, he said. And I'm paraphrasing that one win doesn't change his career, that he knew he was capable of this, and his team was too, that he could win the next 5 or not win again for a while, and it wouldn't alter his understanding of what he is. That's not a guy who's grateful to be there. That's a guy who expected to be. And that should genuinely concern the rest of this garage. Here's the thing about the nepotism conversation. It was never entirely wrong. Ty Gibbs did get his Cup ride because of his family name. There's no alternate universe where a random 20-year-old with the same stat line gets placed in a Joe Gibbs Racing car ahead of Kyle Busch. The access was real. The opportunity was accelerated. Nobody's arguing that. But what the critics always missed is that access and talent aren't mutually exclusive. The fact that the door opened because of his last name doesn't mean the guy walking through it can't drive. And 3.5 seasons of development, of bad weekends and near misses, and maturing behind the wheel in the most competitive division in motorsports. That's real. That's earned, even if the seat wasn't. What Bristol did was collapse the space between those two truths. He has the name, yes. He also outdrove 2 champions on old tires in overtime. Good luck fitting both of those facts into the old narrative. And there's an emotional layer here that's impossible to ignore, even if it makes some fans uncomfortable. Coy Gibbs, Ty's father, Joe's son, died in his sleep in November 2022, just hours after watching Ty win the Xfinity Championship. The family had already lost J.D. Gibbs 3 years earlier. Ty moved to the Cup Series the following season, carrying that weight, with the entire sport watching to see whether he'd fold or fight. When Joe Gibbs was interviewed after the Bristol win, he said he knows Coy was watching. Ty interrupted the interview with a hug. You can dismiss the family angle as PR packaging if you want, but if you actually watch that moment, it was real. It was the kind of raw emotion that doesn't get manufactured in a media center. Now zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Joe Gibbs Racing entered 2026 with a quiet purpose. Denny Hamlin already had a win this year at Vegas. Tyler Reddick, technically a JGR Alliance car through 23XY, has been the most dominant force in the series with 4 victories. Christopher Bell and Chase Briscoe are running consistently, and now Gibbs is 4th in points, 105 behind Reddick with a win locked in. JGR hasn't won a Cup championship since Kyle Busch in 2019. That drought is real, and they know it, but the pieces are moving. The organization feels more aligned than it has in years, and the addition of a winning Ty Gibbs only deepens the threat. For Kyle Larson, who led most of the laps at Bristol and still couldn't close, the situation is starting to sting. The defending champion is now on a 32-race winless streak. Heading into Kansas, he's still one of the most talented drivers in the field, but the narrative is shifting. When the guy you're supposed to beat is now losing to the kid you spent years dismissing, the psychology changes. It's subtle, but it matters. And for the broader championship picture, Gibbs' breakout creates a very specific kind of pressure. He's not going to fade. His consistency this year isn't a blip. 6 consecutive top 6 finishes don't happen by accident. He's entering the intermediate track stretch that favors JGR's equipment. If he gets a second win in the next month, the conversation shifts entirely from first-time winner to legitimate title contender. And that is a different conversation, and that's a conversation that forces other teams to game plan around a 23-year-old they spent 3 years ignoring. So yeah, Bristol gave Ty Gibbs his first Cup win. Emotionally, it was everything you'd expect. The family legacy, the grandfather's tears, the father's memory, but strip away the feel-good layer and look at what actually happened on track. A young driver with improving consistency, growing confidence, and a team that's building towards something outperformed 2 champions when it mattered most. He didn't luck into it, he raced for it. If you're a rival crew chief, but you don't file that under nice story, you file that under problem, what do you think? Is Gibbs a real championship threat this season, or does he need to prove it on the 1.5 milers first? Drop it in the comments, and if you're watching this channel and haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. We don't do fluff here, we break the real story.